Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're going to be exploring how to describe your hometown in a way that really captures what makes it special.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and you might be surprised by our inspiration for this deep dive.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So I was listening to this podcast about improving English speaking skills.
Okay.
They were talking about how to describe places, and it just really got me thinking about my own hometown and how I would describe it to somebody who'd never been there before.
You know, that's such a great skill to have, whether you're traveling or just meeting new people.
Right. And the podcast actually used these two fictional towns as examples.
Okay.
Greenfield and Metropolis.
I've heard of those.
Greenfield's like the quintessential small town. You know, everyone knows each other.
Right. Very close-knit.
Exactly. And then Metropolis is the opposite. It's this bustling city.
The city that never sleeps.
Yeah. And they use those contrasting examples to illustrate all these different aspects of describing a place. So I thought we could use those same examples to kind of guide our own deep dive today.
Sounds like a plan.
So the first thing the podcast talked about was size and vibe.
Makes sense. You got to start with the basics.
Right. Is your town a small town or a big city?
Right. Like, how does that shape the feel of the place?
Exactly.
You know, like, is it the kind of place where everything moves at a slower pace, or is it always go, go, go?
And then once you've got that basic sense of the place down, they talked about special features.
The things that make your town stand out.
Yeah. What are those landmarks or attractions that people would instantly recognize?
Or even those things that aren't necessarily famous, but just make your town unique.
Exactly. Like maybe it's a certain type of architecture.
Right.
Or a beautiful park.
Oh, or maybe a quirky local tradition.
Yes. I love that.
Those things are gold.
They really are. And then, of course, you can't talk about a place without mentioning
The weather.
Of course.
I mean, that shapes everything.
Right. From what people wear to the activities they enjoy.
Absolutely. Like, think about a town with constant sunshine versus a town that gets snowed in every winter.
Totally different vibes.
That's great.
And then finally, there are the people.
The heart and soul of any town.
Yeah. Are people generally friendly and outgoing?
Or are they more reserved?
Is it a diverse community?
With people from all walks of life.
Or is it more homogenous?
These are all important things to consider.
They really are. And one thing I loved about this podcast was how they emphasized sensory details.
Ah, yes, those little things that really bring a place to life.
Right. Like instead of just saying your town has a nice park.
Describe the smell of freshly cut grass.
Or the sound of birds chirping.
Or the way the sunlight filters through the trees.
Yes. Those details make all the difference.
They paint a picture in the listener's mind.
Exactly. It's about capturing the essence of what it feels like to be there.
Spot on.
Okay, so we've talked about the basics.
Size, vibe, special features, weather, people.
Now let's dive into culture and tradition.
Oh, okay, love it.
And again, we're going to use Greenfield and Metropolis as contrasting examples.
Great.
So Greenfield is all about tradition. They have their annual harvest festival.
Ooh, I love harvest festivals.
Me too. It's just such a classic small town tradition.
With parades and local food and crafts.
Exactly. It's all about celebrating their history and their community.
That sense of shared heritage.
Right.
And what about Metropolis? How do they celebrate their culture?
So Metropolis is all about diversity.
Okay.
So they have this massive New Year's Eve bash.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that draws people from all over the city.
Makes sense for a bustling metropolis.
Yeah, it's this huge celebration of their multiculturalism and their vibrant energy.
I bet that's a sight to see.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
But you know, it's not just about those big annual events, right?
Right.
What about those weekly rhythms of life?
Ah, yes. Like the farmer's market every Saturday morning.
Or the open mic night at the local pub.
Or maybe a community potluck.
Those regular happenings that bring people together.
Exactly. And the podcast actually mentioned a couple of specific examples.
Yeah.
So in Greenfield, they have Market Day.
Cute.
Yeah, it's this big community gathering where people can catch up by local produce and crafts.
Sounds lovely.
It is. And then in Metropolis, they talked about Sunday brunch.
Classic.
Right. It's like this time for families and friends to relax and reconnect before the busy week starts again.
I feel like those recurring events really say a lot about a town's values and priorities.
Totally. Like what's important to the people who live there.
Exactly. And what kind of atmosphere they create.
Okay, so we've covered size, vibe, special features with their people, culture, and traditions.
Quite a bit.
We are on a roll. But there's one more essential ingredient we need to talk about.
Okay, let's hear it.
Food.
Yes. Food is culture.
It's so true. And the podcast really highlighted this by talking about signature dishes from each town.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm always curious about local specialties.
Me too.
Yeah.
So in Greenfield, where fresh local ingredients are a big deal.
Right. Makes sense.
They have their famous Greenfield garden salad.
Sounds healthy.
And their legendary homemade apple pie.
Ooh, classic.
Right, like those dishes just scream small town charm.
They do. Fresh, simple ingredients made with love.
Exactly. And then in Metropolis,
the
culinary scene is all about diversity.
Okay.
So they mentioned the Metropolis burger, which is like a classic burger.
Okay.
But with gourmet ingredients and a little bit of a twist.
I'm listening.
And then they also have an incredible sushi scene thanks to their large Japanese community.
Oh, nice.
Right. So you can find pretty much any type of cuisine you're craving in Metropolis.
That's awesome.
I know. So what about you? What are those iconic dishes that instantly transport you back to your hometown?
Ooh, that's a good question.
What would you recommend to someone visiting for the first time?
Let me think about that. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've laid the groundwork, right? We've talked about those big picture elements, the size, the vibe, the food, those things that give you a general feel for a town.
Definitely. It's like we've created this rough sketch of what makes a town unique.
Exactly. But now I think it's time to zoom in a bit, add some finer details, explore those little nooks and crannies that really make a hometown special.
I like that. It's like we're going off the beaten path a little.
Exactly. We're going beyond those tourist attractions and uncovering those hidden gems that only the locals know about.
You know what I think about when you say that?
What's that?
That little hole-in-the-wall bookstore that I love.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's tucked away on a side street. You wouldn't even know it was there unless someone told you.
I love places like that.
Yeah. It's got creaky floorboards and that amazing smell of old books.
I can practically smell it now.
Right. It's not fancy or anything, but it's got so much character.
It's those kinds of places that really capture the soul of a town, wouldn't you say?
Totally. It's like those hidden gems tell a story.
They do. And those stories often go way beyond what you'd find in any guidebook.
It makes me think about that park near where I grew up.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
Well, it's not a famous park or anything, but it holds so many memories for me.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, summer evenings playing with friends, the sound of cicadas in the trees, the smell of freshly cut grass.
That's what I love about this whole idea of describing your hometown.
What's that?
It's not just about listing facts and figures.
Right.
It's about evoking those sensory details, bringing those memories to life.
Totally. It's like you're transporting someone to that place through your words.
Exactly. And the podcast actually had some great tips on how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they suggested tapping into local knowledge.
Makes sense.
Right. Like talking to people who really know the area.
Ask your friends, your family, even strike up a conversation with someone at the local coffee shop.
Exactly. You never know what kind of insider tips you might get.
It reminds me of this time I was visiting a friend in her hometown. And she took me to this amazing little bakery.
Ooh, I love bakeries.
Yeah, it had been in her family for generations. And it wasn't on any tourist map or anything, but it had the best pastries I've ever tasted.
Now that's a hidden gem.
It really was. So we've talked about tapping into local knowledge.
Yes.
But how do we actually describe those hidden gems in a way that really captures what makes them special?
That's where those vivid details come in.
Right. We were talking about those earlier.
Instead of just saying, there's a great hiking trail near my town.
You could describe the feeling of the cool air on your skin.
Or the way the sunlight filters through the trees.
Or the sound of your footsteps crunching on the leaves.
Exactly. You want to create an immersive experience for your listener.
And don't forget about those little quirky details that add personality.
Like what?
So instead of just saying, there's a cool coffee shop downtown.
Right.
You could mention the mismatched furniture, the local art on the walls.
Or the owner who knows everyone by name.
Yes. Those are the things that make a place memorable.
Absolutely. It's all about finding those unique quirks.
It's like adding those finishing touches to a painting.
Perfect analogy. And it makes me think we've been talking about landmarks and attractions.
Yeah.
But what about those places that aren't typically considered landmarks?
That's interesting.
What about that little vintage clothing store you love, or that park bench with the perfect view?
I think those places can be just as revealing, if not more so.
Totally. They showcase the local flavor, those everyday details that make a place feel authentic and lived in.
Like you're peeling back the layers of a town and discovering its hidden personality.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so exciting about this whole exercise.
What's that?
It's about shifting our perspective and appreciating those everyday details that we often take for granted.
I'm starting to think about all those places in my town that I don't even think twice about.
Like what?
That corner store that's been run by the same family for decades. Or the community garden that's bursting with colorful flowers.
I love those kinds of places.
Me too. They might not be in any guidebooks, but they're an integral part of what makes my town feel like home.
And that's what makes it so special.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've already covered so much ground.
We have, from those big picture elements like size and vibe, all the way down to those little hidden gems that you won't find in any guidebook.
And we even talked about how food can be such a powerful way to connect with a place.
It really is. But now comes the fun part.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Putting it all together?
You mean like taking all those individual pieces and creating a complete picture of our hometown?
Exactly. It's like we've been gathering all these amazing ingredients, and now it's time to whip up something delicious.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin?
Well, the podcast had some good advice on that too.
Oh yeah? Lay it on me.
So they said the first step is to think about your audience.
That makes sense.
Right. Like, who are you describing your hometown to? Is it a fellow travel enthusiast, a potential employer, or just a friend who's curious about where you come from?
Because you wouldn't describe a complex dish the same way to a seasoned chef as you would to someone who's just learning to cook right.
Exactly. Knowing your audience helps you decide what details to emphasize, what kind of tone to use. You want to tailor your description to who you're talking to.
Okay, so we've got our audience in mind. Now what?
Structure. Think about how you want to organize your description. Do you want to take a chronological approach, starting with the founding of your town and working your way up to the present day?
Or maybe organize it by theme, like focusing on different aspects of the town, like its history, its culture, its natural beauty.
Exactly. Or you could even take a more personal approach and share your own experiences growing up there.
Ooh, I like that.
Talk about the places that hold special meaning for you, the people you've met, the moments that have shaped your connection to your hometown.
It's like you're taking your listener on a personal tour.
That's a great way to think about it. And just like a good tour guide, you want to start by setting the scene.
So paint a picture of your town's location and its overall atmosphere.
Right. Is it nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains? Is it a bustling port city? Or maybe a quiet suburb with tree-lined streets?
And don't forget those sensory details we talked about earlier.
The sights, the sounds, the smells.
Exactly. Help your listener really experience your town, not just imagine it.
Instead of just saying, my town has a beautiful park,
describe the vibrant colors of the flowers, the laughter of children playing on the swings, the scent of pine needles in the air.
Yes. Those details make all the difference.
And as you're describing all these wonderful things, don't forget to weave in the stories.
Oh, yes. Those personal anecdotes or local legends that add depth and intrigue.
Like the story of how your town got its name, or the tale of a mischievous ghost who's said to haunt the old library.
Stories are like spices. They add flavor and make the whole experience more memorable.
I love that. Now, as we're guiding our listener through our town, we don't want to overwhelm them with too much information at once, right?
Definitely not. Pacing is important.
It's like a dance. Sometimes we move quickly, sometimes we slow down to savor the moment.
Exactly. Create a sense of rhythm and flow. Start with a broad overview, then zoom in on specific details. Use transitions to connect different parts of your narrative.
And don't be afraid to pause and let your listener absorb everything.
And remember, you don't have to describe